Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Show. The show streams live every Wednesday on YouTube, Twitch, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and streamed directly into your ear the following Friday across all popular podcast networks. Hosted by Edward Walton, Andrea Fisher, Rod Trent, and Brody Castle, the Microsoft Security Insights Show provides information, news, and tips on Microsoft security solutions.
Woohoo! Got the intro. Nailed it.
All right, good job, mister.
Man, look at that.
Learning.
Miracles do happen. I mean,
Yeah, I try, man. I try. This podcasting stuff is hard, right? You have to push like one more button than go live, and it's a big.
I mean, it's a new low when Ed was sitting right here ready to do it. If he doesn't do it, I say, do I do it?
Oh, you know how to do it. You learned. Okay. Did you read the instructions? I don't really read instructions. I'm really bad with instructions.
Dude, I just asked AI and they told me.
Really?
Logical way to do this. So yeah. So before we get started, welcome back. Andrea finally made it back to the shores.
I'm never been so happy to be home in my entire life.
Oh, good.
If I just start staring off in the distance or if I'll, just sort of nod off, just ignore me. I know y'all know I was gone. I was supposed to have a quick flight. Well, not a quick flight, but Frankfurt to Budapest, Budapest to Tampa. And it ended up being I had to go cancellations. I ended up going across the world to San Francisco and then back to Tampa. So what was like 14 hours turned into like 32 or something. So I'm still slightly delirious, but I'm happy to be back.
Yay! Oh, welcome back.
It seems to be that European travel when you have layovers and connecting flights. For our listeners, now that we're back home, Andrew and I got to hang out and eat and drink and party, and my wife and I were actually in the same locale in Europe. So we went out for dinner, went to a cool bar, drank champagne, ate caviar, did all the good things, right? Yeah, I know, buddy. Yeah.
Even cooler though, Miriam and Edward picked this bar in Prague called Anonymous, and it was all based on the V for Vendetta graphic novel, if anyone's familiar with that.
Cool.
So the wait staff was wearing the masks and all the drinks were funky. It was a really cool experience for sure.
Maybe we'll show some of the pictures with some of the bartending antics that occurred in the bar. Were really cool.
Crazy.
Yeah, so everybody, the serving staff had the V for Vendetta Anonymous mask on. Music played when they made certain drinks. It was pretty cool.
Flaming.
Yeah, and for those that know me, I'm a drinker. And so when I tell you that the drinks were potent, yeah, they were. They got one that looks like an IV that goes in your arm. We got to put them on the show page to do that.
Cool.
I finally got to meet my nephew from afar. Seemed like I've known him forever, but got to finally meet him. Andrea's real nephew, but I adopted him of a sort. Impressive young man. Very, very, very funny. Miriam is still talking about him. My wife is like, he is so funny. I like him. But yeah, I'm glad you're back. I got back. I had a little bit of a faux pas myself, going and coming. But the most aggravating was they lost our luggage as we cut through Paris. And we told them, hey, our luggage is not on the plane. Where is it? Well, it's here in your airport. Well, how would you know that? Well, there are Apple AirTags in it. And I'm telling you, my bag is not on the plane. And you have 45 minutes before we start boarding. You can go get them. And then, the gate agent snubbed their nose and like, those things don't really work.
Oh, man.
Okay.
Oh, man.
Okay. I'm telling you. So every 10 minutes I would go. See, my bag is still over there. And I said, let me show you. When you bring it, you get Google and use the Delta app. And you see, is that somewhere in your airport? It is. There's where our bags are. It'll be here in time. So I go another 10 minutes. We're 20 minutes before we start general boarding. And I didn't get it. And then my mood was just really, yeah. And then we get to Atlanta, you do the baggage check. The line is around the corner. So I spent another 45 minutes to an hour in line because I only had 2 reps. So thanks, Delta. On that note, as far as being back in the office and working, lots of pricing, fourth quarter shenanigans.
You pricing?
Yeah. I am doing some technical stuff. I'm going to surprise Andrea and finally write one of the 50 gazillion blogs I've been promising about writing. But I'm gonna do this one because this is making me do work about some very specific configurations around the Azure monitoring agent. So, my expertise within this thing that I do is networking. And so it was some very interesting things, throttling, packet burst, all type of stuff, load balancing the AMA thing across. So I'm working with the product group at Microsoft. So I'll take that document and then it's already going to be written. So it'll be easy to go to our site and say, hey, everything you didn't want to know about the Azure monitoring agent, management agent, whatever it is these days, here you go. Right. What else did I break? I learned more about Defender for X across AWS and GCP this week than I never know. Doing that stuff, right?
Cool.
And that's it. Some reading, some studying, and that's it.
What are you studying for?
You know what? I am getting ready to start the endeavor around a Sans GAC course that I want to grab a cert, probably be the last one. And I renewed all the Microsoft ones this week. Renewal came up, so I renewed my EZ500, the SC100, and it was one more. And I knocked those out. And offline, when we can talk, I got to tell you guys something cool. Yeah.
Give me all the answers. The answer's always D.
I would never do that. That would void the ethics and morality of the certification thing.
That's why I was challenging you to see if you were being ethical.
Oh, okay. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
And Frank told me to tell you guys hello. Talk to Frank for a good while.
Oh, good. I hope Frank's doing well.
Yeah, I got to get him back on the show.
Hi, Noodle.
Absolutely.
So, Andrea, I'm not going to ask if you had any interesting work. You were probably. I saw you working today.
I was just because I was trying to find for you. I was going to say, has everyone seen the May cyber signals on business email compromise? I'll put the link in the window for everybody. But
it was on my list to read, but I don't have it. Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you. I didn't get a chance to read it yet.
And absolutely, only 2 pages, but 2 pages, but lots of yummy goodness in those 2 pages. So,
okay, I think I saw it because
maybe 4 pages, but
I think it came from Vasu's desk. It came from her. That's how I saw it. Remember, or either she posted on LinkedIn or something. Maybe we'll see. But in the show notes, I'll go back and read. Brody, what did you do, man?
Well, I mean, some of us have to work. So I was here, Canada's side, and we finished off a project around Defender for Cloud Apps. We didn't get too much into that, but we really focused a lot on the reporting for data loss prevention capabilities and some integrations with Sentinel playbooks. It was very interesting. So shout out to Adriana and Chris, my cohorts on that project, all finished off. And started working more with the department, the public sector customer, a public sector customer on some interesting zero trust items for the defense sector. And so that's super fun. And I'm learning a whole bunch about like the differences between Microsoft's zero trust framework and the Department of Defense's zero trust framework, and how other NATO and Five Eyes countries are adopting these capabilities and solutions to mature themselves moving forward, so everybody can work together and play in the same sandbox. So that's kind of been a real key focus of mine lately. And other than that, I haven't had a chance to watch anything from Microsoft Build, which is on right now, and it's also on tomorrow. I'm just going to get like the readouts because I'm just wall-to-wall meetings. I'm off next week. So I'm not going to get a chance to watch much of it live. I don't know if you two have seen any announcements or anything that's come out live that you want to call out.
A little bit. I very rarely do anything live except for my own podcast because I like to stop it and go back and listen, or I misheard something. But I signed up for it, and there's a couple of things that made me look up. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I look back down and go back to work. But you know what? We talked about some tech things. Let's talk about industry stuff. The elephant in the room. It's all over, so it's not public knowledge that there's been interesting perspective and feedback among the announcement from the leadership team at Microsoft about compensation, right? Some people casually ask, "Hey, was it me? How people feeling? Whatever else." I don't speak for the organization, but it's been mixed feelings. Just for those who don't know, the leadership team at Microsoft announced that for full-time employees and I think executives included, there will be no merit increases or increases to your base salary compensation, but bonuses and such will stay there. Well, that may not be something technical. It affects the people that are technically inclined, right? I have yet to meet someone that says, "Oh, money doesn't mean anything to me." I'm like, "Would you work for free?" Evidently not. So there you go. But it's interesting. It's when you go back and you get away from the shock piece of it, why it's not a decision I would want relish to have to announce or either make. You got to go understand how Microsoft compensates against the industry, right? And what they try to do, and then come to a judgment. But I think a lot of people are just a little bit. I'm gonna use an old 1940s or 50s or 30s. A lot of people are sore about it because we were told to work harder, work with less, do all these other things, and when you see this, you sometimes logic is overrode by emotions. No big deal, Things come around, things happen.
I don't think I want to have this conversation on camera for sure. So.
Yeah, if it affects my ability to buy beer, then I got a problem, right? So
you just put all that beer directly into your biceps too. I mean, like,
hey man,
that's how you do it, don't you? Like,
I just sit here and enjoy the warm weather. Got to have a beach bite. I'm going to the beach here in a little while. Can't be the old man, right?
Well, let's get off controversial topics.
Yeah, Edward, thanks for making it weird.
We had one more minute. We told 15 minutes. One last thing.
Okay.
We may be confusing some of our listeners. Yeah, we're at 4:00. I don't know if we really made a bigger announcement that we are fluctuating between 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're playing with time. We're trying to start this earlier to give people more time left in their day rather than do it at 5. We'll figure out what works. So some people are confused that they are listening live at 5 and we aren't there. That's why. But I do believe that majority of my listeners, supporters, and partners and everything, they listen posthumously, right? After it's already been recorded. But this was purposely, right? So we're playing between 4 and 5 o'clock.
Yes.
And with that, we'll bring in.
Just bugging you, Andrea.
We should also do a shout out. I just saw on Twitter that Tina Turner has passed. So shout out to Tina Turner, one of the greatest musical artists. But
Ever.
Let's bring in Tim on that sad note.
Tim, I could see his reaction.
Tim, tell us your Tina Turner story.
Yeah, Tim, tell us your thoughts on Tina Turner, Tim.
I don't have a Tina Turner story, but I'm so sad that she's passed. She was amazing, right? So
I know.
I'm just trying to think which movie do I like her better in. Mad Max Thunderdome? That was. Am I aging myself already on this?
No, Mad Max Thunderdome is a timeless classic. Are you kidding me? That's
it stands up. So Tim, welcome to the show. I don't know what Brody threatened you with, enticed you with, lied to you about to get you on the show.
I'm a nice guy.
Nice guy. But tell us a little bit about yourself and who you are and what you do, sir.
No, absolutely. Thanks, folks, for having me on. Yes, my name is Tim McCreight. I'm the National Director for Market Development and Strategic Advisory with CGI. I was reminded as I turned 60 this past week, this is my 42nd year in security now.
Okay. Congratulations on the birthday.
Yeah.
I understood every word except for what is CGI?
CGI is based in Canada. It's one of the largest consulting firms in the world. Okay. There's 95,000 of us around the globe. So we focus on IT consulting, and our cybersecurity practice has been around for over 20 years now within CGI.
The CGI that I know. And by the length of your long title there, I guess you do some very important stuff there, right?
I'll let others judge that. So but it is an opportunity for us to actually learn more about our customers and our clients and try to identify opportunities for us to reduce risk. And that's really one of the things that I try to do with our clients, is truly understand what's the risk that they're facing and how can we find ways to reduce that risk.
Well, I met Tim at local B-Sides in Calgary virtually 2 years ago during the back half of COVID. And then last year got to see him speak in person And Tim nails it, of course. So I had to go shake his hand a few times, be like, hey, I'm a big fan. And he has his own podcast, which I'll let you plug, Tim, of course, multiple times, especially near the end. And we'll put that in the show notes. Yeah, Tim's, I thought I knew Tim would be a good guest because I know we on this show talk a lot about solutions, capabilities under the Microsoft stack, more industry broad capabilities as well. And Tim is a huge proponent of enterprise security and risk management, or ESRM. And when Tim gives these talks, or when I've seen him speak to it, and then looked him up and seen other conversations around this that Tim's put out on the Big Bad Internet, it really resonated with me as someone who is coming from a strong technical background and wants to start aligning more towards the organization's security and business outcomes together, blended together. How can we align security with the business? So security is not the Department of No, right? We want to make sure that we're actually right. Tim, am I explaining this right? Is that ESRM in a nutshell?
I'm just going to sit back now. This is good.
Yeah, well, I don't want to take all. All right. So anyway, so I nailed it, right, Tim? Nailed it. That's pretty much it. Yeah. And I think that's important because I had blinders on earlier on in my career, like, oh, what's the problem? You need X. You need a capability. You need a solution. This is what you need to do. I never appreciated the business element of it. I just looked at the technology and you're like, well, why are they making this decision? That's stupid. It's more risky that way, right? But not really understanding higher up why you need to make certain risk decisions across the enterprise. And so, like Edward, in your position, you've had more maturity and more time in the space than I have. I think you have higher level conversations in your career. Andrew, you're in the same position. You understand more of the business elements or the enterprise elements. I think I'm getting there, and that's why Tim's insights and presentation I thought would be an interesting switch up on our normal show topic. So, Tim, that's why you're on. Yeah, Edward, does that make sense? Did I explain that right to you, Edward?
I mean, there is no right or wrong, right?
No.
So, but it did allow me to generate two questions in my head. And this is directed to Tim. So you said security and risk management. They're not mutually inclusive. Oftentimes they're polar opposites, right? Because risk is something when it comes to cyber that was driven by the business. How do you define risk? And then if you defined it, is it unilateral? Because risk is really processing people, and sometimes you really got to be close to the business. Security people like myself can be not in line with the business, but risk analysis say, hey, this is the risk to the disruption of the business. How do you define risk, and what is risk?
Sure. Well, thanks for that. And thanks, folks, for a chance to chat about this. So I've always defined risk from a business lens and business perspective. My favorite description of risk is the first paragraph for ISO 31000. It's the effect of uncertainty on objectives. And then that way it's up to us as security professionals to identify the risks that we face within our current environments. How is that impacting the business objectives? So that's the beauty of enterprise security risk management, is it requires us as security professionals to have an understanding of the business, the goals and objectives, and what does the business need to have in place operating so that it can achieve those goals and objectives. And as a security professional, it's my job to identify what's the risks that are facing those objectives. Can I come up with a way to reduce or eliminate or remediate those risks? And then it's up to the business, though, to make the ultimate decision which risk it's going to accept or which risks it's going to help eliminate, remediate, or remove. My job then as a security professional is to make sure I'm doing the work that they ask me to do and put the controls in place that we need to reduce the risk. So it's a balance. And that was the toughest thing for me to figure out in my career. Was I came from the Department of No. Right? I remember walking to meetings telling, no, you can't do this. No, that's against our protocols. It's against our requirements. No, you're not going to be able to do this. And that was terrific for the hour I was in the meeting. But as soon as I got out of there, that's when the folks went around us. They went around security and started creating shadow IT or their own shadow parts of the organization. They went ahead and did the work that we said not to anyway. It's because we forced them to take a business decision around us as opposed to engaging us. And what ESRM does is it makes the security professional understand the business. And that was one of the things that we missed early on And I remember doing that early in my career, is that I thought I didn't have to know the business because I was there to protect it. No, you actually need to understand where the business is going, what's its goals and objectives, so you can help it be successful. That's our job.
So in the perfect world, it would seem that the risk and the risk analysis team would drive the security portion or execution, but it doesn't always work that way, because we in the industry see like we've made that artificial delineation between the compliance and risk team, and we make that synonymous with process and this and analysis and data capturing, and then you have security, which is around telling people no and enforcing the no with security products, right? But let's talk about risk one more time in a different way. Is the term and the way you look at risk the same and not respectful of the size of a business? How can you make it a common denominator so that the small to medium size, either business or small to medium size corporate, understand that their risk is the same as that? And it may not be the same. The risk at a Fortune 100 company may not be the risk at something else. How do you make that risk conversation that you can have it to a company of 50 versus a company of 50,000?
So I always take a look at what's the impact if the risk actually is realized. And a small organization may be crippled if a certain server is unavailable, or if they can't get their website up and running, or if they can't enter timesheets, or their email system fails. And that's how I always looked at the risk, is what's the impact to the business? So yeah, Ed, you're right. There's going to be different types of risks that face the organization, but the way we need to look at it as security professionals is consistent and the same. Because when I look at helping either a small organization or a Fortune 50 organization, it's the same questions. What do you need to run every day for your business? And if that thing isn't there, what's the impact? What if you can't trade within 5 seconds? What if you can't transfer funds between countries? What if you can't pay 100 and some thousand individuals? Is that the same as a small company that can't get something out of the door of their warehouse and send it down the road to a business? It may not seem the same, but to the company, it has the same impact.
Can risk be fixed with money?
I think
Great question, Edward.
God, I wish I had that money to fix that problem. So I'll flip it back. How much money do you want to spend on the risk?
I want to eliminate the risk.
Then whatever budget you want, absolutely, we'll help you spend it. But let's understand where you want to spend the money first. And is the money where you need to be spent? Is it the best spent for the organization? And from a security perspective, have I identified the risks so that you pick the one that's going to remediate and offer the greatest value from a business perspective, not a technology perspective?
Well, that was a no-lose question for you, Tim. I threw it to you because unless you've encountered a customer that just gave you a checkbook or American Express unobtainium card,
I've had none of those. Just so folks know, none of that has ever occurred in my career, right? So.
Okay, it's I'm dating myself too. The way risk used to be defined was have a backup, right? And that backup was just whatever it may be: backup of data, backup router, backup switch, backup people. People are a risk, right? And so I threw the money part out, knowing that the answer is no, because there are companies that are making billions in profits, if not billions, hundreds of millions in profit, and they choose not to spend on it until the risk is identified. It's like insurance. Nobody wants to pay for it, and nobody appreciates it until you need it, right?
Absolutely.
But so, Andrea had a question. I'll stop.
I was just going to tell you a funny story based on, with Trip TRP 8472 is talking about BCP, DR. So I used to work at a financial services company before I came to Microsoft, and we used to practice quarterly, right? Our, restoration, all the different things. But one Saturday morning, we all got there, and our manager was standing at the door, and he says, "Where's your guide? Where's your guide?" And we're all like, "Inside the building." They're like, "What if the building blows up? What are you going to do?" And then the one guy comes and he's like, "Oh, I got it in the trunk." And he goes, "Oh, you were inside the building." And so,
wow. Yeah, you're inside the building. So he's dead. Scratch him off.
Yeah. Well, you get to lunch earlier, Andrea. Right? I consulted with a critical infrastructure organization here in Alberta, and they had quarterly disaster scenarios as well, and they ranged from basic scenarios to terrorist attack on the grid scenarios, kind of thing, right? And it's when you start getting it to be a part of those exercises, those tabletop exercises, I mean, your eyes just light up with possibility. Like, we need to account for everything, right? Like, I mean, that's just, I mean, Tim, you've worked in a number of different industry verticals. Does that become a daunting task after a while? Do you find patterns and commonalities that you can apply across those different industry verticals?
I think, every sector is unique, but it's still a similar approach where you need to document what you have. You need to practice the plan and adjust it on the fly. But this whole idea of resilience as well, I think that's the part that we've done a lot of disaster recovery planning and business continuity planning. We've done a lot of exercises, but I think we're just now understanding this concept of resilience and how it links back to identifying risks. And it really is this idea that taking into the idea that we are eventually, or we are statistically going to be impacted by an event. How quickly can we recover and get back to normal? And I think that's where, when we look at it from an ESRM lens as well, and bringing in this whole concept of a risk-based approach to understanding the business, that's part of what we have to do as well, is what does that concept of resilience look like, and how can we apply those principles? And I think some of the most interesting disaster recovery exercises I've been on is where it really is this, this concept of design thinking, and that's incorporated in ESRM as well, where you begin with ideation and work all the way through to execution. If you ever get bored on a Sunday and want to read something kind of cool, it's from the 50s, and it's the Brown Book of Design Thinking. It's still on Apple. It's a pretty cool book if you get a chance to read it. It's been around for such a long period of time. And one of the reasons why IKEA has been so successful is they've applied the principles of design thinking every time they design a new piece of furniture. They go through the same process. So I figure if you can fold up a sofa into a small square box, I think I'm going to want to figure out, can I apply the same principles to designing a resilient security program? Yeah, I think I'm going to try. And that's one of the things that the team that actually started with ESRM a few years ago, designing it and then putting it into the textbooks, was this concept of design thinking.
So when did ESRM start, and why?
So actually, we just finished so now I get to plug my podcast. We just finished interviewing one of the parents of ESRM. Her name is Rochelle Lawyer. She's a vice president with Allied Universal. But before that, she was with a few other companies, Time Warner in particular. Her and Brian Allen were the two authors of the ESRM series of textbooks. So if you folks get a chance, it's ESRM, and it's written by Rochelle Lawyer and Brian Allen. So it's been over a decade that those books have been either in process or in design. We've also had 2005 was the very first iteration of ESRM, and that was 3 large security associations came together to identify a risk-based approach to looking at security and designing a security program. So yeah, we've been poking around at this since 2005. I get to sit on a panel in Dallas, Texas for GSX, which is our ASIS. It's their annual seminar and exhibit. It's called GSX 2023. And it's a decade in the making, and it's over 10 years of celebrating the formal processes of ESRM in the security industry. And have we seen value, and have we seen growth in the last 10 years?
Nice. Hey, just super quick, what is ASIS, for our listeners and viewers, what does ASIS stand for, and what's your role in ASIS?
Yeah, so ASIS is the oldest security society in the globe. It's been around for 68 years. I am the president this year of ASIS. I'm only the 3rd Canadian to hold that position. So yeah, it's kind of cool. We've got, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
go us.
First Western Canadian. Does help. So I'm only the 3rd Canadian to hold that position. And I think I am the only cyber individual that has held that position in a security management association. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
A secret security society, like in the movies? It's a very
Kingsman.
So it used to be called the American Society for Industrial Security. So we dropped the any links to the American Society, and we just call her ASIS International. And we have 34,000 members from around the globe in 140 different countries.
Very cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's very cool. Yeah.
You dropped the leadership bullet here. Let me ask you a question about risk. In your ideal world of a corporate structure that is large enough to have a C-suite that includes, security-related C titles, who owns the risk? Because most often when I see something that's a chief risk officer, it's at financial institutions, right? And so who owns the risk? I mean, if does the CISO own the risk? I've seen one company that had a information security officer and a chief risk officer. Are they are they complementary to each other or confrontational to each other? What is that?
So wonderful question. So security doesn't own the risk ever. Because if we do, you're going to get a notepad and a pen, and I want your crayons back at the end of the day. I trust nobody. I have no tolerance for risk. Like in my house right now, I have 5 cameras to watch my dogs walk around the house.
I've been thinking of getting a few just so I know where he is at any given time.
It scares my wife because we actually have all of our stuff up in your folks' cloud, so we can actually draw it down in the event of a disaster in our home. Just saying, pictures of everything around us, serial numbers, because I am that guy. Right. But when it comes to the corporate approach and the concept of owning risk, the board and the executives own the risk, not the CISO. Not the chief risk officer, not the legal officer. It is board of directors, the executive suite own the risk, because at the end of the day, those are the folks that design and create the business goals and objectives. They set the tone and the culture for the organization. And more importantly, they identify what success is. That's not security's role ever. Our job is to advise the business as a trusted advisor, to let them know here is the risk. And it's entirely up to you to pick which path you want to go down. So if you want to run down the hallway with scissors in your hand, that's awesome. I got another meeting to go to. I'm going to follow behind you, though, with a first aid kit when you cut yourself. That's my job. But if you want to go down this path, and we've identified the risk and done our due diligence to present it to the executive, and the executive decides to move forward with a path that is risky, terrific. Our job is to support that as best we can and make sure we're there to help if something does happen. But if it comes down to security owning the risk, and if you actually, so I've tested this theory in a couple of different times in my career. And it's like, well, Tim, you guys have to accept the risk. Awesome. Then I'm going to say no. What? Well, yeah, no, I'm not taking this. No, I'm not going to do this. So my answer is no. Well, Tim, you don't understand what we're doing anyway. Oh, so I don't have that capability, that level of authority, and you're going to do this regardless. You're just looking for the stamp, right? Now I'm not giving you a stamp. You're good. So I always ask that to every new CISO I ever talk to. When someone says you own the risk, can you stop the risk? Can you tell them to stop trading in this one block? Can you tell them to not build a plant in this one country? Can you tell them not to use this one facility? No, then you don't own the risk.
You don't own the risk. So I'm going to pivot off into something right here. And let me ask you this question. Do you believe that reduction in the importance of understanding true risk has been somewhat subdued because of cybersecurity insurance?
I think it's numbed the idea of what could happen if an event occurs. I think it's this idea that, well, I have insurance on my car, I have insurance on my house, so I should be okay if I have insurance in my business. And that used to be correct, that they were able to help in some instances. But I don't know if you folks have been aware of some of the changes and how hard it is to get cyber insurance. And the amount of controls you have to demonstrate, and that you have to not only demonstrate the controls are in place, but you've tested them and that they're effective and that they're able to be audited. So and if you've also noticed the changes in payouts in cyber insurance and what they will cover and pay. So it's lovely to have the insurance if that's the culture of your organization and that you rely on that if something happens. But it isn't a panacea, and it should never be the only thing you have in place to reduce the risks facing your organization.
And I've we often only hear about cybersecurity being executed when the breach is such that it can make the public notice, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Equifax and all these other places, right?
Yeah.
But let me ask you this here: what risk? How do you create your own internal in your head, and how do you take it to someone that you need to listen when they may have? Is it easier when they have regulatory frameworks that they have to map to, GDPR, PCI, but even those are not consistent. If you look at NIST, which is more around controls, right? I don't really think that's a risk mediation thing. It's just about security controls. Which one do you talk to? Because the buzzword now, because we got a lot of shiny news out there. AI is a shiny new and all this other stuff. The other shiny new that's sort of getting a little bit dull. Zero trust. Does that resonate at all?
I think where a lot of these things come in place, like having a control framework like NIST that you follow, or putting in a zero trust architecture that you can, that you can actually apply to your organization and reduce some of the risks facing your environment. I think that's the final end product of conducting what I call going for coffee. So for most of my career, I made sure I spent a lot of time getting out of this security office and go talk to my partners across the business. So one of the things I've done throughout my career is, so Brody will get this, I'm not sure if others will, I'll load up my Tim Hortons coffee card and I'm going to go take folks out for coffee.
I like Hardee's.
There we go. Starbucks, Dunkin' Donuts, pick one, right? But it's get folks out of the office and ask them questions about the business unit. So I would find my counterparts, so other VPs or directors or other leaders within the organization who are outside of the security space, and I would ask them questions about their business and what do they do, and what are some of the things that they do every day that is helping the business be successful. And then the next time I'll take them for coffee. So, hey, we talked about you guys do some great stuff with around the warehouse, and that every day you have to make sure the trucks are loaded because that's how we make our money. But that's awesome. But then the question I ask is, well, what happens if you can't get stuff out of the warehouse, or the system's not available, or something happens that you can't get to the invoicing system or the inventory system? How's that impact you? Oh, well, Tim, I can't send anything out of the warehouse. Okay, awesome. So what do those systems look like? So then I dig a little deeper and ask, what are the systems you need to have in place? So I'll do that for virtually every department I talk to, so that my understanding of the business is based on what they need to be successful. And that's when I can start helping them understand, here's the risk, and are you okay with that? Because if it's not okay, then I have a control framework like NIST. Or if you're looking at maintaining private information about either our customers or employees, we have GDPR that we can follow as a type of control framework. Are you okay if we start looking at that? So that's where you can start bringing in, just to your point, Ed, I can start bringing in those control frameworks and those requirements from a legislative perspective to show them there's a path to help reduce that risk. Can we take a look at that? Something we can work with your team. So we ask for them to be part of the process. So it becomes a very collaborative approach. It takes a lot longer. Right? It's not something where we simply tell you that you're going to go do this, but by bringing it to them, asking them to collaborate with them and identifying risks along the way, you build ownership for the program as well. And it's not my program, it's our program. Mm-hmm. Big difference.
It's all up. It's all up. I can't tell you how many times in consulting engagements these days for large organizations, how many times the customer doesn't talk to the customer, or key stakeholders aren't involved in the decision-making process. And we're kind of we're bringing everybody together because now there's a time crunch, and it's not, to your point, Tim, what you're talking about makes sense, and it will take longer, and it's the right way of doing it, in my opinion. But then in consulting engagements, it's like, okay, well, you've got 24 weeks and we've got to engage, and let's go. Who are your key stakeholders? What are your decisions? Let's implement. And then sure enough, halfway through the engagement, oh, we didn't talk to X critical element, and they have a completely separate list of concerns, questions, and there's a derailment, and why didn't we include them earlier? I just think your the methodology that you're describing, although it does take longer, would you rather do it right and take your time, or would you rather do it quick and do it wrong? I guess would be a way of looking at that.
Well, I have a question that will. Let me ask you, Tim, this. Can you say your title one more time?
Sure. I am the National Director for Market Development and Strategic Advisory Services with CJ.
Does it have a sales component?
Do I have it? I have a requirement to provide consulting to clients, and I do reach out and talk to people from a sales perspective. You bet. Do
you find that convolutes the discussion sometimes, because now sales is so inundated? It's capitalism and the security market unraveling us.
That's a good question, right? So I've never considered myself a salesperson. That's the first thing I tell people. Are we allowed to swear in this show? Am I good with that?
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing is, Jesus, I am probably the world's shittiest sales guy, because I'm not that guy, right? But what I do tell them is that, look, after 40 years of doing this as an operational person in security, both in physical and cyber. So I've had my career span both, right? Half of my career was on the physical side, making sure that my protectee got home safe to the hotel every night, and that the guards were walking around the building, and that the stuff didn't leave the warehouse. Done all of that. And now add in the cyber concept for the last 20 some years. So what I try to provide them is that, having sat in your chair, and I'm going to date myself, when that pager goes off at 2 a.m, the fear that I had, right? Because I knew where all the bad stuff was. I don't want you to have to live that. How can I help?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, my opinion of that is we become so product driven and buzzword driven and reactionary. Every
Yeah.
organization, don't let them fool you. Whether it be Microsoft, Google, some of the people that are on the garden, all of them are still reactionary, and they're being driven by market share,
Sure.
domination. That oftentimes, about the time that myself, Andrea, definitely at a much higher level, and Brody are brought in, I spend some of my time undoing the sales
Yeah.
motion
Yeah.
with unrealistic expectations, right?
Good
Yeah.
point.
I
And so
agree.
now we're designing by budget rather than designing by risk or acceptable risk, right? And that I used to have hair and I pulled it all out, right?
mine was blonde, and no, it's great, right? So,
It's very great. And so if you had one thing,
Very great.
it's great. Yeah. If you had one thing, but and the reason I believe that your job is hard, I can firmly say that I am fully embedded in the security in analytics side of whatever the cyber thing we call. Andrea is too, I believe, right? So if you had one thing to do, how do you? Risk seems so abstract. You can't touch it. It's like measuring security ROI, right? How do you go and tell people without fear mongering?
yeah. Yeah.
How do you do it?
So, I mean, so I've used some, I always try to make things personal and human, right? One of the things that has just annoyed me over these last like decades, whatever happened to the human element of the conversation? Like, when did we start losing empathy for the people we're talking to? When did we actually want to sit on the same side of the table and talk to them about the problems that they're having? As opposed to, and you brought it up, like, oh my God, we have a quarter ending and we got to get going. Or kids, we got to get our team utilized to 100%, get out there and sell bodies. Like, stop. What if you just sat across the table and then eventually sat on the same side of the table with your Tim Hortons coffee in hand and asked them, how are they going with their program? Or what are some of the things that they're worried about? Because what I do is I talk about some of the things that I had to deal with. As I've dealt with floods in buildings and watching buildings go up in forest fires. I've watched personally my apartment get flooded to the point where it damaged an entire half of a condo complex. But because I took the time to work with everybody and go through it all, we resolved all of these problems. It's, where did that go? And we lost a lot of that because, to your point, the emphasis is sometimes on the buzzwords or the technology, or, oh my God, ChatGPT is going to write my kid's homework. Well, good. At least it gets done, right? At least the homework gets done. That's a thought. But what happened to dealing with the human on that side of the table and trying to understand where are they in their current space? Like, when did we stop doing homework on our clients and the people we want to talk to? Like, how many people actually spend the time to read the strategic plan, the 5-year plan? Who's actually the leadership? What's their thoughts? What's their goals? What's their fears? Where are they growing with their business? Where do they want to be in 5 years as an organization? And what do they need to have in place strategically to hit their goals and objectives? And then, as a security professional, how can I help you get there?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling because I come from that old school where you sit down and the customer understands, if I go down in flames, you go down in flames. If I'm up at 2, you're up at 2. If I do this, I do this. And if you convince me as my advisor, when I take this to the powers that be, I need to speak as though, the ideal or the concept, and it came out of my head in doing that. But it's hard now.
Yeah.
You're not dinosaurs. I'm all about the people. I'm all about the shaking of the hands, coming in, understand, tell me your dirty laundry, tell me what's going on. Okay, I get it. But there are numbers to be made.
And I think, though, that there's a cost to that as well, right? So, and Brody brought it up, is that the idea that if we don't do and spend the time and spend it well with our clients in advance of providing a solution, we're re-engineering it later, right? Or we're having to deal with it later. So, great example that Brody and I talked about is that we had a client where we were looking for a renewal with our client, and we'd spent a bit of time trying to come up with what's the best path. Like, how can we actually solve the issue? How can we actually deal with what they're trying to do? And I came on board only a year and a bit ago here with CGI. I had an opportunity to work with the client, and it was what finally made the change for us was we brought you folks in to help us. So we actually were recommending, the Sentinel solution in Azure, and we had some really cool stuff we wanted to do in Azure Data Explorer. But we were trying to figure out, well, how can we get through this? And we need some help. So we brought Microsoft with us to the workshops with the client. We designed a solution with them as human beings working on the technology. And when we gave the final presentation to the client to accept our recommendation, you folks were with us at the table. And the final solution, when we presented it to their executives to sign off, when we presented it, Microsoft was there with us. And 10 minutes later, we got the email saying that they signed off on the contract extension.
Andrea made one of the best analogies about sometimes the way Microsoft approaches stuff that kills us versus how some of our competitors do. I can't say it here; it'll get me canceled for the right people. But it was spot on the way that we approach, and that approach is what sort of enamored me about going in and people trusting me. I love to feel. I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. I want to be the most trusted guy in the room.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, you're definitely not the most smartest, but
I say that all the time. Like I got some wicked smart people working for me. They make me look really good, but it's not me doing it, right? So there's this whole concept of becoming a trusted advisor, and it isn't just buzzwords. It is if you can create the approach where people trust you, and you actually have their best interests in heart. When you sit down and start looking through let's say we follow the ESM approach, when you start identifying what are the risks, it isn't from embarrassment. It's from how can I help? It isn't jumping on it going, oh my God, I can't wait to sell them this box to fix that problem. It's like, let's understand what's the issue, what's the problem, how can we get to a better place? If we keep that in mind, life gets a little easier, not perfect, but it gets a little easier.
I'm gonna be a cynic.
Common sense too.
I'm gonna be a cynic. That thing is solely dying, because if people truly understood what that was, is that when you're trusted, that trust is a relationship that transcends partnership. So when that CISO goes away and goes somewhere else, your name will be dropped, and like, I know that person. I trust how they go about their business, right? So let's go back to the money thing. So
do I still have all the money that I need? Is that right?
Well, no. Here we go. Now we're going to go to opposite. You go to a customer, you lay out a plan to address what is captured risk versus perceived versus potential, and all of a sudden in their head they go, oh my God, we're gonna go broke. But what if you told them, hey, we're going to do this pro bono for you, right? Would you still find resistance for those who may perceive some disruption in their line of business because, you're not charging us, but you're causing us a lot of headache? Have you encountered that?
So I have in the past, like in past lives, where we offered to help out because we knew it was the right thing to do. And how we approached it was a bit different. So what we offered is that, look, why don't you see if we're the people we say we are? And let's offer you our service from the people who are sitting at this table to see if we can help you with your team. And at the end of it, if you think that we are trustworthy, and if you think that we have identified risks that you may not have in the past, or you did and you didn't know what to do with it, and if we can earn your trust, can we also earn your business?
I think that led to the proliferation of services that quickly the salespeople got a hold of it. And nothing against salespeople. Let Jordan tell it. I'm a salesperson. He said he's seen some of my presentations. I'm absolutely a salesperson. But when I understand it, and I totally love the way that you see it and approach it, and I believe a lot of other people do it. But how, once again, it's abstract. How, because what is risk as a budget? How can I measure it from a monetary standpoint to come in? Because the only thing we understand is pain. It seems to be the only thing we understand is pain. So how can you get people to understand potential loss versus what they're spending in advance and measure that you can't say, here's a joke. Edward, what do you do for a living? I hunt aliens. Man, I haven't seen any aliens. Thank you. Right? So when you say I keep hackers out, well, we haven't been hacked. Thank you. So how do you? Right. Because somebody's counting beans, Tim. I ain't gonna lie. Somebody's got to count the beans, and I suspect that you are not cheap. You know, so how do you go in and say, yep, see, here's the alien's head. This is one of those predator aliens right here. Yeah, that's one of those. How do you bring the alien's head to the boss and say, see, this is what you're paying for?
So, and this is where so I'm going to go back to that whole ESRM model. This is where it comes into play. Is you're right. Those conversations like, well, Tim, we've never been breached before. And what I've said in the past lies was something similar to that. And that, that normally gets me chatted with the boss shortly thereafter. But as I got older and probably just a little bit smarter, one of the things that I've always responded to is that I guess how you want to look at the risk and how you want to deal with risks that we've helped identify with you, it's entirely up to you. Because the only skin in the game we have is your skin, your game. And if, let's just say, let's go back to that warehouse example where the only way my division makes money is getting stuff out of the warehouse. Are you okay if the warehouse doors don't work for 4 hours? Or the trucks can't park for a day? Maybe for a day. How about a week? How about a month? What do you want to do with your crew for that month? And I'm okay with you say they're all going to go skateboard. That's awesome. If they're going to get paid, that's awesome. But let's go through the business of what this is going to cost your operations. That's why the time I spend understanding the business is also to understand what do they need to do to be successful. You need to get stuff out the door. If that door's closed, you're not getting stuff out the door. Okay. But there's knockoff effects too. I'm going to pay for it to sit there. I'm going to pay for staff not working. I'm going to pay for things not moving out the door. Okay.
That's where you can come up with the estimates. That's where you can come up with the impact level to really.
So I actually ask folks, and sometimes I'll actually ask them. So from a day-to-day perspective, what would it cost if your systems aren't running today? Just out of curiosity, like what's a day in the life worth you and your team if you're unable to do your job today? And can you live to it? Can you afford that for a day? That's great because some organizations cannot. Can you afford it for a week? How about a month? How about 6 months? How about the time it hits the news? And I go back to some of the bigger ones that we've seen this past little while. Colonial Pipeline was a really good example. So your program and your systems weren't working. Did it impact any? Oh, that's right. It kind of did. You couldn't get gas. What was that impact to others who require your services for them to be successful, to drive their trucks, to drive their cars? So that knockoff effect isn't just you now. You're supplying a service that's considered essential to others. What now? What happens if your hospital gets hit with ransomware and you got to go to paper? Right?
And I think this podcast does more than just introduce CGI, your role, who you are, and your talents and experience. It should also be, AKA, this is why AI is not going to displace us. It can't consult. It gives you a series of conversations devoid of emotion, because if that happens, it's never measured. But the CISO or the CIO or somebody goes, "Oh crap!
Yep,
I'm about to lose my job."
Yep. I agree.
My people.
So do you know what artificial intelligence and what some of the amazing technology we have in place, what it's going to do is help make our jobs easier by getting things faster.
Yes.
Right? So one of the things that
mediocre tasks or
exactly, and
tasks,
it takes away some of the mundane. And what I found was, and again, this is from the podcast Doug Leese and I, where our podcast is Caffeinated Risk, and we talk about the concept of risk in business and how we've matured this last 10 years or so. So Doug and I were interviewing Rochelle Lawyer, and it's ready to go tomorrow is our podcast date for Thursday. But in the podcast, one of the things Rochelle talked about is that artificial intelligence and engines like that won't replace the human at the far end of the equation, because you're still going to need a person sitting across from a person asking questions about the business. What AI will do and other tools like that will do is be able to collect information for us far faster, far more efficiently. It will take it seconds and minutes, as opposed to for me to do, let's say, a physical security assessment of a building. That's going to take me weeks. Right? I'm going to need pictures. I'm going to need to know what's the crime stats, how close is it to a fire hydrant, what's the path for weather, is it in a floodplain, is it in a tornado district? That can be found by artificial intelligence in seconds, which frees me up to ask some more meaningful questions and do work that isn't considered preliminary or prep work. So I see the value that we're going to be able to bring in the technology and what it brings to us. We'll be able to use it. But yeah, Ed, to your point, it's not going to sit and have a chat with the CEO talking about, hey, just so you know, if you 3 more days of the warehouse down, you guys aren't making your quarter this year. As long as you're good with that.
You're right? Looking at it. You're looking at morale.
I know the TV and movie execs sure seem to think that AI can replace writers. So who knows?
Right.
So
It won't. Andrew, you read my mind. I was about to say the same thing. It won't, because AI doesn't have the nuances that make us us.
Yeah.
It doesn't know how to lie yet, and giving you a wrong answer is not a lie. Right? It doesn't
Depends
know
on
how
the
to lie yet.
models. Depends on
Right.
the knowledge it's drawing from. But
Yeah,
why is it
yeah,
always
there
so
we go.
confrontational, right? Why does that to be? It's going to replace. Why can't it just be augment?
Well,
I always find the framing of the conversation is always very
I-
sensationalized, right? Like,
I'm not a technology, obstructionist. I'm not against it. I believe it has, but I'm listening to the way that it's being described, and I'm finding that even with yourself, Tim, we are being slowly and insidiously affected by the sales conversation in our ears that sometimes makes us listen more to what it really can do. Speed. I heard you say speed. Yeah,
Yeah.
we know that computers are just chess. They do. But what I keyed on in that comment was mundane task. Let's take AI in the frame of self-driving cars, because we know that's what it is, right? You got to have that. Driving to me is not mundane. I was almost in two car accidents. I was in a car accident here in the last 3 days, and I was crashed to death. So I love the thought of it, but people talking absolutisms about speed does it faster, mediocre tasks. There is no unified definition of what a mediocre task is, right?
Well, that's fair. It's subjective.
It is very subjective, and repetitive is not the key all of it. It's what it is. So but I don't want to make it about the AI thing. It's a thing. It's going to be a thing, and it's definitely needed, right? I want to look at it how you can just go through calculations, because think about it. I was in the United States Navy. They were doing nuclear detonation models for decades. Like, this is what will happen if you detonate a 155 megaton, right? Nuclear device. So we've always had those data models. But back to risk. We're not going to go into killing aliens and doing all this. So
maybe we could automate risk somehow.
Hey, there we go.
Right. Yeah. Maybe we could. Well, at least maybe the impact of a risk event. Right. Do you find that, Tim? Are there ways of actually like feeding a model where you can say what's the impact? One day, a week, or a month? Or you must be leveraging technology solutions to help with these extrapolations, to help with this.
We're trying to. I haven't found a model yet that reflects as close to actuals as you can get, right? And I think some have tried. There are some great corporations out there that are actually taking a run at this, and it's like everything else. I think, a data lake requires the right streams to feed it, and you have to check the integrity of the data as it goes into the data lake. So a model that's going to estimate the potential impact to an organization from an event, it's going to need an awful lot of data points. Right?
I have an idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Really? What's your idea?
Well, the idea requires trust. The data sets are there, but the data sets are so siloed because they are attached to the companies that help them remediate the risk. So if you were able to go get a true data feed from breaches and put them in and be able to look at it, maybe you'll have a calculation of behavior that either reduce the risk or do it. So I would think, Tim, tell me, that a lot of the models would be, what could I pull from incident response, whether it be Microsoft, Mandarin, whomever, and now start creating risk models based on what the response and what ultimately led up to it, and have it in a shared model. Because I'm sure there were there's a whole lot of internal stuff that was never shared about some very well-known breaches, right?
Agreed.
And until you can feed, because everybody believes that well, it's not belief, it's real, right? Data is valuable. I'm not going to share my data, right? And but if you had that common criteria, that common feed into it, that everybody told the truth about what happened, right? And legal is going to say you can't say anything because now you got to take on ownership and all this. But if you had that model, you can look at it and say, that's the risk right there.
Yeah.
Irregardless of the industry, that's a risk. And now when that risk can transcend medical, farmer, education, and everything else, security does that. Security says you got to protect your endpoints.
Yep.
Security says you got to protect your identities. Security says you got to stop these people from installing the apps on their machines and shadow IT. But nobody identifies the risk of those things, and most often it's not really measured until such time you either violate a control or the aliens come and they forgot to catch up. So that's
the insurance argument. Do I really need insurance for this thing? Is it really going to happen to me? I always find
I'm gonna keep my mouth shut about this cyber insurance. That will definitely get me in
Tim,
trouble.
time checked. You got to go.
No, I'm good for now. I've got some thought time.
Right.
You betcha. Yep, you
All
betcha.
right. Well, like wrap it up because Edward just wants to talk about aliens. He loves getting on it, so we'll nip that in the butt before it progresses any further. But I think it's a really engaging conversation. Edward, great questions. Tim, great responses. Great, thanks for sharing the stories. What do you want people to think about, or the major takeaways from this episode? So ESRM is a methodology.
Absolutely.
Is it, where do you want people, like a caffeinated risk, your podcast? What else do you want people to know coming out of this episode about ways that they can better affect maybe their security program in their own organizations, or if you're a managed service provider or you work with a variety of customers, how you can be a better trusted advisor for other entities?
Well, I think it's a great question. So there's a couple of things. One, the idea that as security practitioners, we should really focus on what's the business goals and objectives of either the organization I'm there to protect, or if I'm a managed provider, who I want to help as my client. And if I need to truly understand that the first approach we should take is a business-based approach. And that's hard, right? Because I've been training folks on this methodology for a number of years, and the hardest audiences I've ever come across are security professionals who still think it's on them to accept every risk for the business.
Bingo.
Not, right? Because as soon as you do that, right, then I'm just going to give it to security. And I got lots of stories. We don't have that kind of time where it was simply, Tim, you have to sign this. No, I don't. No, I won't. And here's why. So getting the business to understand that from a security perspective, the risks that we identify, that's you. So that I do this, I have this great chat with a lot of executives, and it's the 2 a.m. phone call, right? At 2 a.m, you're the guy. I understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
I may get the call first, and my team's going to work on it to help fix it. But when it comes time to talk about how am I going to, oh my God, we got to talk to the press. You're the guy, because you're the business. You run the business unit. You're the CEO, chief operating officer, the role that you have. You're going to represent the business in this event. I'm going to be the guy behind you, like in a Senate hearing, going, please don't answer that question. You need to get off camera. But your role is to represent the business and explain to the shareholders, the stakeholders, the customers, and the clients that you got this. And here's how we're going to get you better. Here's how we're going to recover from it. If you're leaving it up to security folks, wow, they're really not a good idea. Our job is to help remove or reduce, eliminate, return back to normal. So that's the first one. And then the second one is this idea that the human element is the one thing we haven't put back into the equation in a long time, and it's time to do it again. One of the things that I've been really successful in my career these past many years is to sit down and just talk to people. Ask them the questions. My job is not to sell you the latest piece of gear, et cetera, because quarter end is coming and I'm going to give you a great spiff on it. No, my job is to actually help. Can I help you understand what's the problem you're trying to solve, or what's the risk you're worried about? Or, hey man, I've sat in your chair. I know exactly what it feels like to get that phone call and just be panicked because it could be one of 5 things that's going to tank the company tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Been there, done that. What can I do to help take away some of that from you, or at least help you make your proposal to your executives more palatable, that you can focus on the business? Or is there any way that I can help you see things from a different lens and try to look at that perspective? So it's finding that human element again, because, Ed, you brought it up. We've got all this great technology and it sounds like, the machines are going to take over. No, it's still going to need us to actually make those conversations happen. And it's still going to be us to identify what part of the technology we want to put into place to reduce the risk.
Yeah, whether the technology. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Andrew.
You said one thing, Tim, that I would love for the people listening, watching to really think about. So my very first IT job was at Outback Steakhouse. And I will tell you that very few people, if any, in IT actually understood how a restaurant ran. So I think it's super, many companies do not bring those two things together. And then I talked about the financial services company that I worked at. The financial advisors were in Tower 1, we were in Tower 4, and we were not even allowed to enter Tower 1. So super difficult to know what it is the business needs when you're not either, if you're not allowed to go into the restaurant and see how it works, where you're not allowed to talk to the financial advisors. So for the people listening, if you do have that kind of siloed environment, this is a great time to try and break those down. I mean, I as a IT person could talk about what was needed, how to build a server, but I don't know necessarily what does a waitress or a waiter or a cook need IT wise. So breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, no, that's great point. It's great. Because one of the things that I did in a previous role as a CISO, I was new to the role, and it took me a year, right? But I actually wandered around and got to as many people as I could in that 1 year and talked to them. But I also, all the directors that reported to me, the first thing I made them do was to read the strategic plans for all of the departments across the company. And they're like, boss, you came here and said, no, I'm actually serious. So there's like 23 different divisions in this organization. And there were anywhere from 50 to 100 and some odd pages. They said, go find their strat plans, read them all. You got till Monday. So they took off on the weekend and spent their time reading it. But there was a reason why I did it other than to ruin their weekend. It's like, look, when you now are representing the security department and you're sitting in front of one of these executives and they come up with something like, oh, yeah, we're going to launch this website. It's going to go up on Friday. We just need you guys to take a look at it. Whoa, wait a second. Is that part of the strategic plan? Because I didn't see it when I read your plan. Is it supporting one of your business goals or objectives? Because I'm trying to see the link between what you're launching and what you're trying to achieve. And more importantly, did you actually go through change management prior to the PMO office to light this thing up? Because we didn't see it. Oh, no, you don't understand. This is a good friend of ours, and they were just doing some work for us inside. So that's a skunk works, is what you're telling us. So you're on your own, sir, and understand at 2 a.m, you're the guy. So that killed about 65% of the noise that we dealt with every year just by following that approach of, hey, wait a second, I actually read your plan, but I didn't see this in there. We're here to help, just not sure how this is panning out. And it really forced people to look at things from a business lens, because as soon as they called us, we went back to the plan. I went, can I just double check to make sure that that's actually in your plan for this year? Just curious, right?
Love that.
So you're engaged with a customer, and we're up against it. I'd like to ask, at least my last question is, I don't know what the engagement model is, that from the time that you pursue a customer to the time that you get in front of them to the time that you have an agreement to go in and do some work for them. But you got 7. What are the right 7 people to have in the room at the initial conversation? Because oftentimes I'm finding the wrong people are in the room. Right? And we always holler about decision makers. Decision makers make bad decisions, right? We always assume that they're in the room and they make perfect decisions. They make bad decisions. Who are the right people to have it in the room, irregardless? It goes what to Andrea said. How can you really have
representation?
Yeah. I don't want to minimize what is really a thing in the world. There seems to be a lack of D&I inside how we go approach things. Right? Yeah. There's a lack of inclusion in the way we go about our business as a thing. How do you get the right people in the room? Because I'm finding that when they know they have someone who's going to ask the hard question, that person doesn't get invited to the room.
And that's fair, right? So I'm allowed 7, right? So
7.
I would. So let's, I'm now with this mythical unicorn consulting group. There we go. So we'll call it unicorn. So it would be me and 6 people from the client side.
Okay.
And the 6 would include whoever, the first pass, if I was trying to actually establish some trust and rapport and understand the problem, give me 2 people who actually are dealing with this problem every day at an operational level. Mm-hmm. Give me 2 people who support this at an operational level. Mm-hmm. And give me 2 people at an administrative or leadership level who have to make decisions at that level. That's it. Let's start with that.
Love it. No title.
And I'll give you one more. I'm not gonna count the coach as one of the 7 people. So you get one more. Give me one more.
And I want all of them to have different perspectives. I hope they don't agree on the best way to solve the problem. I hope that they don't look at this and all have the exact same approach of, we just need to buy box A. No, let's actually have an interesting conversation. And it isn't just going to be a meeting. Get to the whiteboard. Here's a marker. Walk me through it.
Love it.
Right? And then let's get some more coffee and let's keep moving forward on the whiteboard to figure out, where do you really need to be and what happens if this thing you're worried about does happen tomorrow morning at 2 a.m. What's the plan?
Let's call your group.
Yeah. It all sounds so simple when Tim explains it.
Exercise this mythical cyber insurance thing people talk about. But well, sir, thank you so much. I don't have any more questions to my esteemed co-host. Anybody? I like these advisory and these consultative conversations because, we're hitting a gamut. Sometimes we're technical, not as much, but we're going to get back there. We've had a lot of partners that come in and talk about how great they are. We've had some really good technical guests that if you talk about how this thing works, they're really good at it. But if you talk about how this thing works with that, they go, well, okay, you can go with that. So I love the advisory thing. It blunts the hurt that I felt when, Brody said I was the salesperson, I'm not technical anymore and all that, right?
I said that first for the
record. I'm a consultant.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and Edward, I believe you want to be a trusted advisor in any situation you're dropped into. I think we all should be, right, and strive to be that. I think that's where ESRM, the methodology, and just the examples that Tim brought to the table today helps achieve that. No.
Yeah. Not a perfectionist, but I'm going to get in and I'm going to consult. I will be the bane of your sales team if you believe I'm here to hit a deadline. You don't direct me. I'm telling you what's right for the customer. We're going to do it this way.
And buy coffee. Buy a coffee card. Buy a Starbucks card. Get a Timmy's card. Yeah, absolutely, Tim. Yeah, another major takeaway.
Well, Tim, thank you so much.
Thank you for coming. What a great conversation.
This is really, 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 really good. I mean, it made people think. People are trying to not think anymore. What the hell is going on with that? Right?
It's summertime, but yeah, I feel you. Yeah, it was an engaging conversation. Thanks for being generous with your time, Tim.
I won't lie and say if I'm in your area of the world, I'll come have a beer with you, Tim, because I won't be in your area of the world.
Well, next time I'm in yours, I'll let you know. Right? So,
there you go. Yeah.
Tim, I don't know if you just saw, we had a great quick question from our good friend TRP8472. Any particular learning path or cert path that you would recommend?
Oh, wow. Other than 42 years of hard knocks, sure. If you actually go to that ASASonline.org, there's a great online program that talks about the principles of ESRM and how you can actually sign up for our course, take the course, and then get some material for it. So yeah, if you actually want to learn more about how ESRM works and how you can apply it to your organization, that's a great place to start.
And then maybe one day you could be president.
One day maybe you could be president. You kind of got to join first and be part of the whole show, but then you can be president.
Oh, no, I can't do that. Well, I'm just well, everyone, have a great rest of your evening. Thanks for those who are listening live at our hour earlier show. We will fluctuate between 4 and 5 before we finally figure it out. Thanks to our live viewers and listeners. Thanks to those who are going to listen to it afterward. Recorded May 24th, 2023. We are the Microsoft Security Insight Show and Podcast.